The throne room of the Velnorith Imperium stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, and its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the golden arches that held it up. Emperor Zithan IV sat upon a throne made from the compressed cores of dead stars, and his 4 eyes looked down upon the thousands of servants and soldiers who knelt before him in perfect silence. He had ruled the Orion Spur for 300 years, and his ancestors had ruled it for 12,000 years before him. The Velnorith were the masters of this region of space, and everyone knew it. They had conquered 10,000 worlds, and they had enslaved hundreds of species, and they had never once faced a power that could challenge their dominance. Today was supposed to be a simple day of routine, reports and minor decisions, but Grand Admiral Kethvorin had requested an urgent audience, and the Emperor had granted it because Kethvorin was his most trusted military commander. The Grand Admiral walked forward through the massive hall, his heavy boots clicking against the crystal floor with each step. He was tall even by Velnorith standards, standing nearly 9 feet with 4 powerful arms and a face covered in hard plates of natural armor. His military uniform displayed 17 medals of conquest, each one representing a world he had personally helped to subjugate. He stopped before the throne and performed the ritual bow of respect, lowering his head until his chin touched his chest. "Rise and speak," the Emperor commanded in a voice that echoed through the hall like thunder. Kethvorin stood straight and activated a holographic display that floated in the air between them. "Great Emperor, our long-range scout probes have discovered a new civilization in an unremarkable system at the edge of our territory." The hologram showed a yellow star orbited by 8 planets, and the 3rd planet from the star was highlighted in blue. The natives call their star Sol, and they call their world Earth. Kethvorin continued, "Our analysts have been studying them for the past cycle, and I bring you their complete report." The Emperor leaned forward slightly on his throne. His interest growing. New civilizations meant new resources, new slaves, and new glory. For the Imperium, "Tell me about these creatures," he commanded. Kethvorin manipulated the hologram to show images of the alien species. They were strange-looking things, with only 2 arms and 2 legs, soft skin with no natural armor, and faces that showed their emotions far too easily. "They call themselves humans," the Grand Admiral said. "They are a young species that has existed for only a few 100,000 years, and they have had technology for less than 10,000 years." The Emperor studied the images with growing amusement. "They look weak," he observed. "They are weak, Great Emperor," Kethvorin agreed. "Our analysts have classified them as a level 23 civilization on the standard scale." A murmur of laughter rippled through the assembled court. A level 23 civilization was barely above primitive, and it meant that the humans had only recently discovered space travel and had not yet spread beyond their home system. "What is the state of their military?" the Emperor asked. Kethvorin changed the hologram to show various human weapons and vehicles, primitive chemical rockets, Great Emperor, and weapons that use explosive projectiles and basic energy reactions. He showed footage of human wars, of tanks rolling across battlefields and aircraft dropping bombs on cities. They fight among themselves constantly, and they are divided into hundreds of separate nations that cannot agree on anything. The Emperor laughed, and his laugh was cold and cruel. They cannot even unite their single world, and yet they dare to call themselves a civilization? "Indeed, Great Emperor," Kethvorin said. "They have no planetary shields, no orbital defense stations, and no warships capable of faster-than-light travel." He paused and allowed himself a small smile. They would be unable to resist even a minor patrol fleet, let alone a full invasion force. The Emperor stood from his throne, and everyone in the hall immediately dropped to their knees. He walked down the steps slowly, his robes trailing behind him like rivers of liquid gold. How many ships would you need to conquer this world? He asked Kethvor and considered the question carefully before answering. Truthfully, Great Emperor. 100 ships would be more than enough. He paused again. But I would recommend sending the third expansion fleet in full force. 800 warships for a primitive world? The Emperor asked with raised eyebrows. That seems excessive, does it not? It does, Great Emperor, Kethvorin admitted. But the humans number nearly 10 billion, and they are spread across their entire planet. He brought up more images showing human cities covering the continents. If we wish to capture enough slaves for our mining colonies and enough specimens for our research facilities, we will need the full fleet to secure the planet quickly before they can destroy themselves in panic. The Emperor nodded slowly as he understood the logic primitive species often chose mass suicide over enslavement. And a slow invasion gave them time to make that choice. Very well, he declared. I hereby authorize the conquest of Earth. He raised his voice so that everyone in the throne room could hear him clearly. Grand Admiral Kethvorin, you will take the third expansion fleet to the Sol system, and you will bring me this world and its people as tribute to the Imperium. Kethvorin dropped to one knee and bowed his head. It will be done. Great Emperor, go now and prepare your fleet, the Emperor commanded. I expect to hear news of victory within 2 cycles. The Grand Admiral rose and marched out of the throne room with pride swelling in his chest. This would be an easy conquest, and it would add another glorious chapter to his already legendary career. He thought about the soft and weak, humans who had no idea what was coming for them, and he almost felt sorry for them, but pity was a weakness. And the Velnorith had no room for weakness in their hearts. As Kethvorin exited the palace and looked up at the stars, he imagined Earth burning under his fleet's weapons. And he smiled. He did not know that far away in the Sol system, hidden sensors had detected the Velnorith probe months ago. He did not know that humanity had been watching his empire. For 200 years, he did not know that. Everything he believed about the humans was exactly what they wanted him to believe, and he did not know that in 7 days, his entire fleet would cease to exist. The humans were waiting, and they were ready. And they were nothing like what the Velnorith expected. But Kethvorin would learn this truth soon enough. He would learn it in fire and silence and death. And it would be the last lesson he ever learned. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, in a facility that did not exist on any official map, Fleet Marshal Yuki Tanaka walked through corridors of cold steel and bright lights. She was 63 years old. But advanced human medicine had kept her body strong and her mind sharp. Her black hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her uniform bore the symbols of the United Earth Defense Command, an organization that the public had never heard of and would never hear of until the time was right. She entered a massive underground chamber where dozens of officers from every nation on Earth sat at holographic displays, monitoring data streams from across the solar system. This was the war room, the heart of humanity's true military power, and it had been active and ready for over a century. Marshal on deck. Someone called out, and everyone stood at attention. At ease, Tanaka said as she walked to the central command platform. Give me the latest update on the alien fleet. Admiral Chen Wei stepped forward with a tablet in his hands. He was the commander of the Asian defense sector, and his family had served in the UEDC for 3 generations. The Velnorith Third Expansion Fleet departed their staging area 6 hours ago, he reported. 800 warships carrying approximately 2 million soldiers. He pulled up a holographic display showing the fleet's projected path through space at their current speed. They will arrive in the Sol system in approximately 7 days. Tanaka studied the display with calm eyes that showed no fear. And they still believe we are primitive? She asked. Yes, Marshal, Admiral Chung confirmed. Our deception protocols remain fully effective." He smiled slightly. "They think we are a level 23 civilization with no interstellar capability." Tanaka nodded and turned to address the entire room. 200 years ago, our ancestors detected the first Velnorth probe entering our system. She walked around the platform as she spoke, making eye contact with officers from every nation represented. They could have panicked, and they could have revealed themselves and tried to negotiate. But they did not. Her voice was strong and steady. Instead, they made a choice that would define the future of our species. She stopped and looked up at a large screen showing images of the Velnorth conquering other worlds. They watched, and they learned, and they saw what the Velnorth did to species that were not strong enough to resist. The images showed alien cities burning, innocent beings dragged away in chains, and entire populations worked to death in mining camps. They saw the cruelty, and they saw the evil. And they knew that one day the Velnorth would come for Earth. Tanaka's eyes hardened. So they began to prepare. She activated a new display showing the true state of human technology. For 2 centuries, we have hidden our real capabilities from the galaxy. And for 2 centuries, we have built weapons that the Velnorth cannot imagine. The display showed massive structures hidden in the asteroid belt, weapons platforms concealed in dimensional pockets, and a network of sensors that covered the entire solar system. Project Prometheus gave us power sources that can crack planets. She continued, "The interdiction web can freeze any ship in space regardless of its technology, and our erasure cannons can break apart matter at the molecular level." Admiral Sarah Morrison from the European sector raised her hand. "Marshal, why did we wait so long to reveal ourselves?" It was a question that every new officer asked eventually. Tanaka had answered it many times before. "Because we only get one chance," she said. "If we had revealed ourselves before we were ready, the Velnorth would have sent their entire military to destroy us." She pulled up data on the full strength of the Velnorth Imperium. They have over 100,000 warships spread across their territory, and they have conquered species that were far more advanced than us when we first detected them. She let that information sink in. We needed to be strong enough to not just defeat one fleet, but to make the entire Imperium afraid to ever attack us again. Admiral Chun nodded in understanding. "That is why we let them believe we were weak." "Exactly," Tanaka confirmed. "We broadcast old television signals and launched primitive rockets and pretended to fight among ourselves over petty conflicts." She smiled, and it was the smile of a predator that had been waiting patiently for its prey, and they believed every bit of it. She turned back to the main display showing the approaching fleet. "Now they're sending 800 ships to conquer a world they think cannot fight back." Her smile faded, replaced by cold determination. "They will learn how wrong they were." Admiral Morrison spoke again. "What are our rules of engagement, Marshal?" Tanaka considered the question carefully. "Complete destruction of the invasion fleet." She answered, "No survivors, no escape, and no mercy." Some of the younger officers shifted uncomfortably at her words. She noticed and addressed their concerns directly. "I know this seems harsh, but you must understand what is at stake." She pointed at the screen. "If even one ship escapes to report what we can do, the Imperium might decide to attack us with everything they have before we can prepare further defenses." She shook her head. "We cannot allow that." Admiral Chun added his support. "The Marshal is right, and we have studied Velnorth psychology for 2 centuries. He pulled up behavioral analysis data. They only respect strength, and they only fear what they cannot defeat." He looked around the room. "If we show them any weakness, any hesitation, they will see it as an invitation to try again with more ships." Tanaka nodded. "Our goal is not just to win this battle, but to make them afraid to ever return." She raised her voice. "We will show them that Earth is not a prize to be taken, but a threat to be avoided. The officers in the room straightened with new resolve. We will show them what humanity really is. She walked back to the central platform and began issuing orders. All interdiction web stations will activate in 6 days, and all erasure platforms will power up to full capacity. She looked at Admiral Chun. I want every sensor in the system tracking that fleet from the moment they enter our space. She looked at Admiral Morrison. Prepare the quantum recording devices, because I want every second of this battle documented from the enemy's perspective. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Why from their perspective? Tanaka's smile returned, cold and calculating, because we are going to send those recordings back to their emperor. She turned to face the main screen one final time. We are going to show him exactly what happened to his precious fleet, and we are going to make sure he never forgets it. The countdown to contact had begun, and humanity was ready. 200 years of preparation, sacrifice, and patience were about to pay off, and the Velnorith had no idea what was waiting for them in the darkness between the stars. The third expansion fleet emerged from hyperspace in a flash of blue light that lit up the void like a temporary sunate. 100 warships materialized in perfect formation, each one a mountain of metal and weapons, capable of burning continents to ash. Grand Admiral Kethvorin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Imperium's Wrath, and watched the yellow star of Sol grow brighter in his view screen. He felt proud and confident and ready for an easy victory. All ships report successful transition, his communications officer announced. Fleet formation is holding steady. Kethvorin nodded with satisfaction. Begin standard approach, and activate all scanner arrays. The fleet began moving toward Earth at cruising speed, and sensors swept the system looking for any signs of resistance. The bridge crew worked with calm efficiency, performing tasks they had done dozens of times during previous conquests. Officer Thyravin stepped up beside the Grand Admiral. We should reach optimal bombardment range in approximately 4 hours, she reported. Shall the first prepare the ground forces for deployment? Not yet, Kethvorin said. Let us see what defenses these primitives have before we commit our troops. He expected to find orbiting weapons platforms or perhaps a small fleet of crude warships. He expected some kind of resistance. Even if it was pathetic and doomed to fail, what he did not expect was nothing. Admiral, the sensor officer called out with confusion in his voice. I am detecting no military assets in the system. Kethvorin turned to look at him. None at all? None at all, Admiral, the officer confirmed. No defense stations, no warships, no weapons platforms. He adjusted his instruments and ran another scan. There are some primitive satellites orbiting the third planet, but they appear to be communication and observation devices only. Thyravin frowned. That cannot be right, because even the most primitive species put up some kind of defense when they detect an invasion fleet. Perhaps they did not detect this, Kethvorin suggested. Their technology may be even more limited than we believed, but something felt wrong, and he could not identify what it was. Continue scanning, and report anything unusual. The fleet moved deeper into the system, passing the outer gas giants and their many moons. Still nothing. No ships came out to meet them, and no weapons fired at them, and no communications attempted to contact them. The silence was unsettling. Try to intercept their communications, Kethvorin ordered. I want to know what they are saying about us. The communications officer worked his console and then looked up with surprise. Admiral, I am intercepting thousands of signals from the planet. He listened to his equipment with growing confusion. They appear to be entertainment, broadcasts and commercial messages impersonal. Communications, he paused. None of them mention us at all. Kethvorin felt his confidence begin to waver. That is impossible, because our fleet is massive enough to be detected by even basic telescope technology. I am telling you what I hear. Admiral, the officer said, They are discussing sports and politics and celebrity gossip. But no one is talking about an alien invasion. Thyravan moved closer to the view screen and stared at the growing blue dot that was Earth. Either they are completely blind, or they do not consider us a threat, or they are hiding something. Kethvarn said quietly. He did not know where that thought came from. But once it entered his mind, he could not shake it. Increase scanning power to maximum, and search for any anomalies in the surrounding space. The sensor officer obeyed. Pushing the ship's advanced detection systems to their limits, I am detecting nothing unusual. Admiral, he reported after a long moment. Just empty space and some asteroid debris? But Kethvarn noticed something strange in the data. What about that region there? He asked, pointing to a sector of space that appeared completely empty. That is just void, Admiral. And there is nothing there. Run a gravitational analysis. The officer looked confused but obeyed. His expression changed to shock when he saw the results. Admiral, there is a gravitational anomaly in that sector. He ran more calculations. The mass readings suggest something large is present, but our visual and electromagnetic scans show empty space. Kethvarn felt cold fear begin to creep into his heart. How is that possible? I do not know, Admiral, the officer admitted. Our instruments must be malfunctioning, but the instruments were not malfunctioning. And deep down, Kethvarn knew it something was out there. Something hidden, something watching. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships. Increase alert status to level 2 and prepare all weapon systems for immediate activation. Acknowledgements came back from all 800 vessels. Crews were professional and calm. But Kethvarn could hear uncertainty in some of their voices. They had noticed the strange silence too. Admiral, Thyravan said, perhaps we should send a scout wing ahead to investigate. No, Kethvarn decided. We stay together. Because there is safety in numbers. He stared at the view screen where Earth continued to grow larger and prepare a surrender demand. Because I want to hear their response before we proceed further. The communications officer composed a standard conquest declaration and broadcast it toward Earth on all frequencies. Attention, inhabitants of the planet called Earth. You are hereby ordered to surrender immediately to the forces of the Velnorath Imperium. The message continued with threats of destruction if they refused and promises of mercy if they complied. It was the same message the Imperium had sent to hundreds of conquered worlds, usually. Panicked responses came back within minutes, with desperate leaders begging for terms or trying to negotiate. Earth's response came exactly 30 seconds later, but it was not panic, and it was not desperation, and it was not begging. It was laughter. A human voice spoke over the channel, calm and amused. Velnorath Fleet, we have been expecting you. Kethvarn felt ice form in his blood. Who is this? My name is Fleet Marshal Yuki Tanaka of the United Earth Defense Command, the voice said. And I am here to welcome you to the Sol System. There was a pause. And when she spoke again, her voice was no longer amused. We know who you are. And we know what you have done to other species. And we know why you have come. The lights on the bridge flickered. Every light on every ship in the fleet flickered at the same moment. You believe you have come to conquer a primitive world. Tanaka continued. You believe we are weak and divided and helpless. The stars outside the view screen seemed to shift and shimmer. You were wrong. And then the space around the Velnorath Fleet began to change. And Kethvarn finally understood the true nature of his mistake. The fabric of reality itself seemed to tear apart around the Velnorath Fleet. What had appeared to be empty space suddenly unfolded like origami made of darkness. And from the void emerged structures that defied comprehension. They were massive beyond anything Kethvarn had ever seen or imagined. Each platform was angular and black, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to move and shift when observed directly. There were thousands of them. surrounding the fleet in every direction. And the smallest of them was larger than the Imperium's wrath by a factor of 10. "What are those things?" Thyrvan whispered, her voice shaking for the first time in her career. Kethvorin had no answer. He stood frozen on his bridge, staring at weapons that should not exist. Built by a species that should have been primitive. "All ships, open fire." He finally shouted, "Destroy those platforms." Across the fleet, weapons officers obeyed with desperate speed. Plasma cannons fired streams of superheated matter, and missile bays launched hundreds of warheads, and energy beams lanced out toward the massive human structures. None of it mattered. The plasma dissipated against invisible shields without leaving a mark, and the missiles detonated harmlessly in empty space. And the energy beams simply bent around their targets as if deflected by gravity itself. No damage detected to enemy platforms, the weapons officer reported, his voice cracking with fear. "Our weapons are having no effect at all." Kethvorin grabbed his command console with all four hands, then rammed them, and ordered all ships to full speed ahead. The fleet surged forward, engines burning at maximum power, ready to sacrifice themselves in a desperate attempt to destroy even one of the human platforms. The ships did not move. 800 warships strained against invisible bonds, their engines flaring with all their power. But they remained frozen in place as if held by the hands of gods, Admiral. "Engines are at full power, but we are not moving." The helm officer screamed, "We are caught in some kind of field." The sensor officer added, "It is locked onto every ship simultaneously." Kethvorin tried to think, tried to find some way out, but his mind was blank with terror. The human voice returned, calm and cold through the communications channel. "Your fleet is now inside what we call the interdiction web," Fleet Marshal Tanaka explained. "It is a network of spatial anchors that lock matter in place by manipulating the fabric of space-time itself." She paused to let that information sink in. "Your engines cannot overcome it, because you are not fighting against thrust. You are fighting against the universe itself. You cannot do this." Kethvorin shouted at the viewscreen, "Release us immediately, or the full might of the Imperium will descend upon your world." "We have studied the Velnorith Imperium for 200 years, Tanaka responded. "We know exactly how many ships you have and exactly where they are stationed." Her voice carried no emotion. "Your full might does not frighten us." On the bridge of the Imperium's wrath, crew members were beginning to panic. Some were crying, and some were praying to gods they had forgotten long ago. And some simply stared at the massive human platforms with hollow eyes. Kethvorin tried one last desperate gamble. "What do you want?" he asked. "Name your terms, and the Imperium will negotiate." There was silence for a long moment. 12,000 years ago, the Velnoreth began their expansion across this region of space, Tanaka finally said. "In that time, you have conquered 10,000 worlds and enslaved hundreds of species." Images appeared on every screen throughout the fleet. Images of Velnoreth atrocities that the humans had somehow recorded. You worked the Kithrani people to extinction in your minds. Images of frail aliens collapsing in underground tunnels. You hunted the Silvari for sport until only a few thousand remained. Images of terrified beings fleeing through forests while Velnoreth soldiers laughed. You burned the libraries of the Mentari because you feared their knowledge. Images of beautiful buildings crumbling to ash while ancient texts were destroyed. "There are no terms?" Tanaka said. "There is no negotiation." Her voice hardened. "There is only justice." The geometric patterns on the human platforms began to glow with light that hurt to look at. "This weapon is called an erasure cannon," Tanaka explained. "It breaks apart molecular bonds at the quantum level." The light grew brighter. "Your ships will not explode, because there will be nothing left to explode." Kethvorin fell to his knees. "Please," he begged. "My crew is innocent." And they are just following orders. The crews of 100,000 conquered. Ships said the same thing before your ancestors killed them, Tanaka replied. The Velnorith showed no mercy then. The light reached its peak. We show none now. The platforms fired beams of impossible light lanced out from every direction, each one striking a different ship with perfect precision. The effect was instantaneous and absolute, wherever the beams touched. Matter simply stopped existing. Ships did not burn or break apart or explode. They unraveled. Metal and flesh and energy dissolved into nothing, spreading outward from the impact points like shadows being erased by Don Kethforen. Watched as the ships around him vanished one by one. He watched as his fleet, the pride of the Imperium, was wiped from existence in moments. He watched as the beam reached his own flagship. He had time for one final thought. One moment of clarity before the end. He thought about how arrogant he had been, how certain he was of victory, and how completely he had underestimated the creatures called humans. Then the light touched him, and Grand Admiral Kethforen of the Velnorith Imperium ceased to exist. The battle, if it could be called a battle, lasted exactly 7.3 seconds in that time. 800 warships and 2 million soldiers were erased from the universe as if they had never been. The interdiction web deactivated, and the erasure platforms folded back into their dimensional pockets. And the space around Earth returned to peaceful emptiness in the war room beneath the moon. Fleet Marshal Tanaka watched the final sensor readings confirm total destruction of the enemy fleet. The room was silent. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They had done what was necessary. But there was no joy in so much death. Confirm all recordings are secure, Tanaka finally said. Confirmed. Marshal, Admiral Chun replied. We have complete sensor logs from every destroyed ship, captured through quantum entanglement before they were erased. Tanaka nodded. Then prepare the message, because we have one more task to complete. She turned to face her officers. We did not fight this battle just to defend Earth. We fought it to change the galaxy. She looked at the screen where Earth floated peacefully, unaware of how close it had come to enslavement. Now we must make sure the Velnorith understand what happened here, and what will happen again if they ever return. The humans had won their first battle, but the war for the galaxy's future was just beginning. 3 days after the destruction of the third expansion fleet, a data package arrived at the Velnorith homeworld. It came through hyperspace channels that the Imperium had believed were completely secure. Delivered by methods that their scientists could not explain, the package was addressed directly to Emperor Zithan IV when his advisors told him about the mysterious transmission. The Emperor felt the first stirrings of unease. The Third Fleet should have conquered Earth by now, and he should have received victory reports and tribute manifests, not strange packages from unknown sources. He ordered his technicians to scan the data for traps or viruses, but they found nothing harmful. It was simply information, compressed and organized and waiting to be viewed. The Emperor had the data transferred to his private viewing chamber, where he could watch it alone before deciding how to respond. He activated the holographic display and began to watch. The first images showed his fleet emerging from hyperspace in the Sol system. He recognized the Imperium's wrath at the center of the formation, and he felt pride at the magnificent sight of 800 warships moving together. Then the images changed. He watched. His fleet scanned the system and find nothing. He watched them approach Earth with growing confusion. He watched the lights flicker on every ship simultaneously, watched space itself unfold around his fleet, revealing weapons platforms that made his greatest dreadnoughts look like toys. He watched his ships try to fire and fail. He watched them try to flee and fail. He watched Grand Admiral Kethforen fall to his knees and beg for mercy, and then he watched his entire fleet cease to exist in less than 8 seconds. The Emperor watched the footage 17 times. searching for any sign of deception or trickery. But there was none. The recordings had been captured from his own ship sensors, transmitted through quantum channels. That could not be falsified. Every detail was real his. Fleet was gone, 2 million of his. Soldiers were gone, and the species he had dismissed as primitive had destroyed them without losing a single ship. After the footage ended, a recorded message began to play. A human female appeared on the screen. The same one who had spoken to Kethvorn before the end, Emperor Zithan IV of the Vulnerith Imperium. Fleet Marshal Tanaka began. By now you have seen what happened to your invasion fleet. She stood straight and calm, showing no fear or arrogance. We could have destroyed that fleet before it ever left your territory, because we have known about your empire for 200 years. And we have been watching you since before your grandfather took the throne. She let that information sink in. We chose to let them come to us, because we wanted you to see what happens when you threaten Earth. Images appeared beside her, showing the same atrocities that had been displayed to Kethvorn before his death. We have also watched how you treat the species you conquer. Her expression hardened. We have seen the slavery and the genocide and the cruelty. She paused. We find it unacceptable. The images faded, replaced by a simple star map showing the extent of the Vulnerith Imperium. You have 100 years to release every enslaved species in your territory and to reform your empire into something worthy of existence. Red dots appeared on the map, marking every Vulnerith military installation and population center. We know where all of your ships are stationed. We know the locations of all your major worlds, and we can reach any of them whenever we choose. The message continued. If you attempt to attack Earth again, we will not simply destroy your fleet. We will destroy your entire military capability. Another pause. If you continue your pattern of conquest and enslavement, we will end your empire entirely. Tanaka's expression softened slightly, but we are not like you, and we do not desire conquest or revenge. She spoke with genuine sincerity. We want peace, and we want the species you have oppressed to be free, and we want the galaxy to be a better place than it was before we revealed ourselves. She looked directly into the recording device. You have a choice, Emperor, and you can choose to be a tyrant who clings to power until we tear it away from you. Or you can choose to be a reformer who leads his people into a new era of peace. The star map disappeared, replaced by an image of Earth floating in space. We will be watching, just as we have always been watching, and we hope you make the right choice. The message ended. Emperor Zithan IV sat in the darkness of his viewing chamber for a long time. After the recording stopped, his advisors eventually came to check on him, and they found him staring at the blank display with an expression they had never seen on his face before. Fear, pure and absolute fear within days. The message had leaked throughout the empire. The Emperor's technicians tried to contain it, but copies spread through unofficial channels faster than they could be deleted. Soon every citizen of the Vulnerith Imperium knew what had happened at Sol. More importantly, every enslaved species knew. In the mining colonies of Kathra Prime, workers who had never known freedom whispered about the humans who had destroyed an entire invasion fleet in seconds. In the reservations where the surviving Silvari were kept like animals, stories spread about a species powerful enough to threaten the Imperium itself. In 100,000 oppressed communities across 10,000 worlds, hope began to grow. The news spread beyond the Vulnerith borders as well. Other empires and civilizations learned about the humans of Earth, the primitive species that had somehow developed weapons capable of erasing matter itself. Some were frightened by this new power, others were inspired by it, and a few, the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy, simply nodded with understanding. They had seen the pattern before. Species that hid their strength until they were ready to change everything. They knew what the humans represented, not just a new military power, but a new idea. The idea that the strong should protect the weak instead of exploiting them. The idea that civilization meant more than just technology and territory. The idea that the universe could be fair back on Earth. The governments of the world finally told their citizens the truth. The secret of the United Earth Defense Command was revealed. Along with the 2 centuries of hidden preparations, some people were angry about being deceived for so long, but most understood why it had been necessary. They looked up at the stars with new eyes, knowing that humanity was no longer alone and no longer weak. They felt proud of what their species had accomplished, and they felt ready for whatever came next. Fleet Marshal Tanaka retired from active service 6 months after the battle. She had done her duty, and now it was time for younger officers to lead humanity into its new role in the galaxy. On her last day, she stood on the surface of the moon and looked up at the Earth hanging in the black sky. She thought about all the Thuristud species that had suffered under the Velnorith and how their lives might finally change. She thought about the future her ancestors had sacrificed everything to build, and she smiled because, for the first time in 12,000 years, the galaxy had a reason to hope. Humanity had announced its presence to the universe, and the universe would never be the same again.